Well, today we are going to talk about parallel modes. So in our last live stream, if you haven't watched that, I highly suggest checking it out. It's linked down below. We talked about what are called relative modes. And what that is essentially taking a group of 7 notes and starting on different points to create different modes. So if you played a C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, back to C, that's C major. But if you took those same notes and you started on D and went D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, then you're now playing what's called D-Dorian. And those scales are relative to one another because they contain the same collection of notes. That's really important as ukulele players because we want to be able to solo using the whole neck. And sometimes we need to play a mode in a different way, meaning we might play our G Mixolydian scale as a C major scale because they're relative to one another. They contain the same collection of notes. What we're going to talk about today, though, is a little bit more musically applicable. Last week was more like ukulele-centric. Today, still we're using the ukulele, obviously, but it's more about the sounds of these modes and how they really are different. So today's all about parallel modes, and what this means is we're going to start with our C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? And then we're going to look at the other 6 modes that exist starting on C. So we're going to work on our major, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, also known as minor and Locrian. Oof, that's a lot. Starting and ending on C. And the primary goal here is if this is overwhelming, which honestly, if it's not overwhelming, really good for you because this stuff is so overwhelming. It's more about listening to these sounds and hearing how different modes of music can create different identities for songs. And that's kind of what's so cool about it. So let's go ahead and pick up our ukuleles, and let's start with our C major scale. And our C major scale, we learned in our last live stream as well. It's just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. 0 on the C string, 2 on the C string, 0 on the E, 1 on the E, 3 on the E, 0 on the A, 2 on the A, 3 on the A. It's just those straight notes going up and then back down. Now, in our last exercise, we went all the way up and down the neck, made it a little bit more challenging if you're a newer player from the standpoint of just the mechanics. This time, we're going to never go above fret 4. And what's so great about that is that means we've got 1 finger per fret the whole way through. Your index finger will always play the first fret, middle finger always the second, ring finger always the third, and pinky always the fourth. So this is actually an easier time to play, even though it might seem a little bit more complicated to understand at times. So that's our C major scale. And you can really hear it's very stock. We know this sound. It's friendly. It's, a nice, it's major. There's not a lot to it, right? And so if we were to look at the next mode now that's listed on the sheet, the next one is our Dorian scale. Now you'll actually notice that there are numbers associated with this on the sheet. In major, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. As we go down, we're going to be altering those numbers to create different modes. And Dorian is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, back to 8, which is sort of interesting. It's going to take the third note, which was an E, and it's going to flat it to make an E flat. And it's going to take the 7th note, which was a B, and flat it to be a B flat. So let's go ahead and try playing this. To do this together, what we're going to do is play open on the C, and then we're going to play 2 on the C, 3 on the C. That's our E flat note, so C, D, E flat. Then we're going to play index here on F, and then ring on G, open on the A, and then 1 on the B flat, and then 3 on the A for the C. Again, using 1 finger per fret as we go through, so you always know which finger to use based on that position. So a C Dorian scale sounds something like this. Really cool sound, actually. This is one of my favorite modes. And the reason why we're starting on it is because of the position based on the relative stuff that we worked on last time, right? We went C major and then we went into D Dorian. So we're just keeping with that same sort of, order. But C Dorian sounds very, very different than C major, doesn't it? It's more minor, isn't it? The reason why it sounds more minor is that minor third interval, the E flat. Anytime you have an E flat note with C, it's going to be more of a minor scale sound. Anytime you have an E natural, it's going to be more of a major sound. That's something to kind of note as we go through this. But the Dorian mode is really great. It's, again, one of my favorites. In fact, if you listen to something like this, it would be something like... I should have worked this out before the lesson. What I'm playing right now is a little bit of Oye Como Va by Carlos Santana. Right? You can hear that sort of sound. That uses the Dorian mode. That's what's so cool about this sound and what makes it so unique. That Dorian is just this kind of happy sound within minor. And the reason is because the sixth interval, that A natural, is not normal in the key of C minor. And that is what makes it sound Dorian. So kind of cool. Another example of a song that uses this is Mad World, the song from Donnie Darko, or the cover rather from Donnie Darko. And it's just a very common sound in music. It's used oftentimes in jazz as well. In fact, when I was studying jazz in college, they would call Dorian the jazz minor because it's just, well, it's jazzy. So that's your Dorian. Very unique sound, and it's pretty cool. If we move on now to Phrygian, this is crazy, right? So Phrygian, well, it sounds something like this. Oof, it's very Spanish sounding, right? It's this really, really interesting sound. And it's created by lots of flat intervals. If you look at the sheet, it's a 1 to flat 2 to flat 3 to 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and the last note being the 8 or the 1 again. So that flat 3 that we talked about just a moment ago makes it sound very minor. But then you also flat the 2 and you flat the 6, which we didn't have in the Dorian, and the flat 7. It's a very minor sounding scale, but it's really quite cool, isn't it? Now, this scale, again, I mentioned before, it kind of elicits some of that almost like, Spanish flamenco type of sound. And that's really common with this Phrygian vibe. And it's just a really, really nice texture and tone. It's one of my favorites to just sit and play with because it's a really fast way to transport yourself somewhere different musically. If you're sitting here playing C major, you're in C major, you know that really well, right? But if you start playing your C Phrygian and you just mess around in it, a really unique space to kind of play around with. It's just this beautiful sound, right? And so that's Phrygian. It's more of that Spanish flamenco type of sound. Also, a minor scale because of that flat third. We go to the next one here. We've got Lydian. Lydian is really, really fascinating. It's a major scale because it's got that normal E major, E natural note. But it's different than the major scale because it also has what's called a sharp 4. So what this sounds like, what Lydian sounds like, is C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C. And so to play that, it goes 0 on the C, 2 on the C, 0 on the E, 2 on the E, 3 on the E, 0 on the A, 2 on the A, 3 on the A. And those notes are C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C. And when you hear this, it's happier because it's that major interval. But then it's a little ethereal, isn't it, right? That F sharp note, very weird. And that's a sharp 4 interval. It's a very different sound. This is used more in kind of like sci-fi, especially older sci-fi movies would use this F sharp interval, this sharp 4 to create this sound of otherworldly. If you listen, you can hear how it just kind of sounds like it's floating out in the ether. It's a really, really interesting sound. It's less common than some of the other modes. Like Dorian's very common. The one that we're doing after this is very common. Lydian, not so much. But if you're wanting to make a soundtrack to a sci-fi movie, try your Lydian. It's a great way to start. And the way to really focus on it is that F sharp note, that sharp 4. Because if you look at it, Lydian is 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's only one note different than major, which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So by adding that sharp 4, you make it Lydian. And not just by adding it, but focusing on it. You can really bring that Lydian sound forward. And it makes for a really, really interesting sound and exercise. The next one after this is Mixolydian, my personal favorite. Mixolydian is also a major because it's got that non-minor 3, non-flat 3. And Mixolydian is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so far just major, right? Flat 7, 1. So to play this, it's going to be C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat to C. So it's a major scale, just the last note, or second to last note, is flatted, right? So to play that, that would be 0, 2 on the C, 0, 1, 3 on the E, 0, 1, 3 on the A. And that B flat note makes it almost like medieval sounding or blues, which don't usually go together, but the reality is they both have that sort of sound. If you hear that, you know, that's a very kind of medieval sound, right? Right? But it's also kind of bluesy with that flat 7, which is really cool too. The Mixolydian is one of the most powerful scale modes because it works really well for soloing. As I mentioned earlier, the C Dorian scale, or rather just the Dorian scale, is considered kind of a jazz minor. The Mixolydian scale is considered sort of a jazz major. It's very commonly used. In fact, harp players, or actually harmonica is what I mean by harp there, harmonica players will actually use a different key harmonica when they're playing so that they can get that flat 7 interval because they want to play in a Mixolydian sound because the harp and the blues are so closely tied together. They want that sound really present, which is kind of interesting and cool. And so the Mixolydian sound really, really nice, really interesting. And just playing with it, you can start to create some of these sounds. Again, the only different interval between this and a standard major is that flat 7. So lean into it a little bit, right? Lean into that B flat. And you can create some really unique, really rich sounds. Now the next one after this is C minor, also known as Aeolian, right? Aeolian's the sort of scale mode. I believe it's Latin. You'd think I'd know this by now, but minor is how we more commonly know it. And minor scales, well, they sound like this, right? It's a very, very stock sound for sadness, just like the major is a stock sound for happiness, the minor. A stock sound for sadness. And to play this, what we do is we play open on the C, 2 on the C, 3 on the C, 1 on the E, 3 on the E, 4 on the E, 1 on the A, 3 on the A. And that sound here is minor. Now, if you're still following along, because I know this has been a lot, this is where things really start to tie together. With a minor scale, you can see the 1, 2, flat 3, 5, flat 7, flat 6, flat 7 to 8. Those notes of the scale are really what create the minor sound, specifically that flat 3 being so important. And if you look to the Dorian, you can see the difference between them being just that one note. It's just the 6th note, instead of being flat like it is in the minor, it is raised. It's normal in the Dorian. And that's the only difference in the sound between minor and Dorian. And that makes the Dorian a little bit more major sounding, right? Because that 6th note is more of the major sound, right? The non-flat 6. And that's kind of cool. You also look at the Phrygian. It's exactly the same as minor, except it also has a flat 2. So the flat 3, the flat 6, the flat 7, those are all present in both. But the flat 2 of the Phrygian makes it like even more minor, right? So if you listen to minor, and then you listen to Phrygian. Oh, messing up the mode. You can really hear that flat 2 makes it much, much more minor and sad. It's kind of an interesting thing to know with the modes. There's sort of a minor mode, also known as the Aeolian, and then there's kind of like a minor with a major tinge, which is the Dorian, and then there's a minor with even more minor tinge, and that's the Phrygian, right? And so if you look back to the Mixolydian for a moment, it had the flat 7. It was a major mode with that flat 7. And that made that one sort of the major mode with a little bit of a minor tinge, right? Because that flat 7, that B flat, is present in the minor. Our major scale was just everyday major. And then if you look back even before the Mixolydian to the Lydian, that sharp 4 that was there, that's like, you know, the opposite of minor. It's going away from flatting notes. It's adding these sharps. And so what you get is the same sort of relationship with your major scales, where you have your major, which is just major, and then you have your Mixolydian, which is a major with a minor tinge to it. And then you have your Lydian, which is major with even more raised notes type of tinge. You could call it almost more major, but it's kind of weird, right? So it's cool to see how these 6 modes all interact, because they create a lot of different options for depth and opportunity with your songwriting. And just learning these 6 modes and playing through them can start to get you to creating different sounds. And if you're completely overwhelmed with all this, know that you are not alone. I learned these modes over the course of many weeks of music theory school, going 5 days a week, and we're doing it in 18 minutes. But it's a concept that you can really create some different sounds with. And the thing that you can roll with is just sit and play these modes. Just play off of this tab and listen. Just kind of hear yourself play and make little notes of, what do I like for the sounds? Do I like the major or minor modes? Which is my favorite? Which is my least favorite? Kind of go from there. So just to recap, we have 6 modes so far. And we've learned that they're kind of major or minor modes, and there's kind of 3 of each. We have C major, also known as Ionian. That's our stock major. We jump all the way down to measure 11, and we have C minor, also known as C Aeolian. Right? Those are kind of our 2 structures of like happy and sad. And then from there, we have a couple more of each. So the Dorian scale was a minor scale with a raised 6. Right? The Phrygian scale was a minor scale with a flat 2. The Lydian scale was a major scale with a raised 4. And the Mixolydian scale was a major with a flat 7. So it's kind of cool, right? But you notice there's one more mode. We didn't even talk about that last mode. Well, that last mode is Lydian. And Lydian sucks. I'm going to get some flame for that, but that's okay. My younger brother is a band teacher. And his girlfriend, who we love, is also a band teacher. And I once said at a family dinner, Lydian sucks. And she got very upset with me, rightfully so, because you shouldn't say those type of things. But Lydian, the reason why I don't like Lydian is it sits in a realm that's definitely not major. And it's almost not really minor either. This mode you could call a diminished mode. So the major mode was defined by a major third, and the minor mode was defined kind of by a minor third, right? Like those 2 different intervals give you a sense of one sound versus another. A Lydian mode has a minor third, so okay, it's more minor, and no debate there. But it also has a flat 5 interval. If you notice, every single mode we just played to this point has a G natural note. C, D, E, F, G. G is the 5 of C, and it's present in all the major and all the minor modes. It's important because in C Lydian, it's G flat. And Lydian, I described as more of a diminished scale. The reason is diminished, the most iconic part of a diminished chord is that lowered 5 interval. So that's crazy. That's a lot. And when you listen to it, it just sits in stasis. Here's what a Lydian sounds like. You can hear it doesn't resolve at all. And it makes it a tough sell for when you're learning it. because it has less applicability than the other modes. Now, maybe you love it, in which case, awesome. To play it, you go 0, 1, 3 on the C string, 1, 2, 4 on the E string, 1, 3 on the A string. That's a weird mode, isn't it? But it is its sound, its signature sound. I prioritize this mode a little bit less just because it's harder to use really well in soloing because it has neither a true major or true minor sound. It's got that diminished vibe, but when you can use it, it does sound quite nice and you can, apply it. And it's worthwhile to learn because just like the other modes, it has a purpose. And so if there's anything that you take away from this lesson today, it should be we should play our I'm so sorry. I said Lydian. The sheet was actually mismarked. It is Locrian. Have I been saying Lydian this whole time? It's early in the morning. I need more coffee. Back up one moment. That last scale that we played is a Locrian scale, not a Lydian. They both start with L. That Locrian scale is what gives you that diminished sound and what is going to really create that sort of vibe. So if I said Lydian, I am so sorry. Locrian is what I meant to say. So what we have for our modes here is the first one being our major, also known as Ionian. And then we have Dorian, which is a type of minor scale, Phrygian, which is a type of minor scale, Lydian, which is a type of major scale, Mixolydian, which is a type of major scale, Aeolian, also known as minor, and then we have Locrian. The sheet I was looking at mislabeled as Lydian, which would definitely cause some confusion in the AM. So those are the modes that we're working with, and in this case it is Locrian that we're playing for that seventh mode that doesn't sound as good, and so that is that sound, that diminished sound. It's funny too because I love these terms to use as names for characters in video games. Locrian is a fantastic character name if you're going to play a game like Skyrim, but I digress. So we have these 7 modes, one to represent each starting point with this. And it's pretty cool to think about it this way because when we looked at it parallel, we looked at the same collection of 7 notes, right? But when we look at it as or relative, wow, I'm really on it. The first thing that we looked at was relative, which is the same collection of 7 notes being used again and again. So relative modes would use the same notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, using those same collection of 7 notes, starting and ending on different ones of those 7s, create relative modes to one another. So if I start on C and end on C using those notes, it's C major. If I started on D and ended on D, even though it's using the same notes, it's starting on D, ending on D, that creates a D Dorian, which is relative to C major, which is pretty cool, right? Well, in this case, we're working on parallel, and parallel just means you're starting at the same point and ending on the same point. It's going through the same beginning to end, but the journey in between is different, which creates different sounds for these modes. They are the same sort of concept in terms of how they're created. They're just looked at different ways, which is kind of neat. And as you get more into scale theory, you start to see that relationship and how it can be applicable to however you're playing it on the ukulele. It is a lot of stuff, and it certainly, isn't made easier when your teacher starts saying Lydian instead of Locrian. But it's all there. It's a lot of fun to start working through and just to start listening to as you're playing with this. So again, if there's one thing you take away from this, just try to play each of these modes that are listed. Play your Ionian, also known as major scale. Listen to the sound of it. What do you think of? Well, you probably think of, really stock music. If you descend a major scale, you get some Christmas music. Kind of funny, right? Then you go to Dorian. It's like, okay, what's Dorian? Well, this to me is very much that, a lot of like Latin jazz type of sound. It's again, we call it the jazz minor sometimes. And specifically Carlos Santana, like Oye Como Va. You can hear that sort of sound come through. And then we go to Phrygian. It's like, okay, Phrygian. What vibe am I getting from this? Well, I'm getting that Spanish guitar type of sound. Really, really neat, right? We go on to Lydian. What's Lydian give us? Ooh, that F sharp note is real spicy, isn't it? It's more that ethereal, Really, really interesting sound, right? We go on to Mixolydian, which is another major scale like Lydian, but it's got that flat 7, which creates a little bit of a minor vibe in there. Right? Cool sound. We go to Aeolian, also known as minor. Very stock. We know that minor sound so well. And then we go to the last one, Locrian, the 7th mode, and that's that very diminished sound, right? So try playing with those modes, try hearing the sounds and see what you can kind of come up with. And from there, you can start to understand how different things are created. And it's very rare that you're outside of major and minor. Those are the most common. But elements of these modes are used all the time in music. And so it's fun to explore. I'm going to open up to questions now. I'm going to start looking at the chat. I saw a few questions as I was talking through all this stuff. Connie says, is there a logic pattern to this, or do you just have to memorize which have however many flats or sharps? Fantastic question. So what's cool about the modes with the tab that we've been working on is that tab gives you the shape that you can essentially play off of. So whatever note you start on the C string is going to be the root. So if I want to play, let's say, a D Dorian scale, what I need to do is look at measure 3, and you can see the C Dorian starts on 0. Well, you find a D note on your C string, which is 2. And you add the number 2 to all of those. So 0, 2, 3, 1, 3, 0, 1, 3 becomes 2, 4, 5, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5. And you can move this anywhere you want to create those modes. I could play it up here at G if I want to, right? It's all the same. So this tab is actually also a cheat sheet to move these modes up and down the neck as you'd like to. You can also learn it based off of what it is. So if I look at Dorian and I think 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or flat 7, 8, I can use that recipe now and build it around different majors knowing that information. But that is a big ask, right? So doing this is definitely the best way to start working with the modes and applying them more immediately. Zil says, I'd love to see a series of etudes on rock class in all different modes so we can hear it and apply it. That's a great idea. I'm going to ask Drew about that. That sounds fun. I'm going to see if I can do that for the next tutorial. I love that. Zil says, I'm lost in most respects, but I understand that the magic behind really different cool sounds is modes. Breakout of C major. Yeah, it is. I mean, I was lost, right? I was saying Lydian when I meant Locrian. Man, it's so easy to get lost with this stuff. And so the most important thing you can do is try to take away one piece at a time. Just try to find that one nugget. Maybe for you today, that's like, oh, the Phrygian sound is cool because of the flat 2. And that's it. That literally could just be that, and that's all you get, and that's fantastic, because now the next time you watch this video or you experience modes, you can find something else to explore and to enjoy from it, and just continue that process of finding one thing at a time that you can hang on to and apply with your practice. Ricky says, I'm with you, Zil. And then Ricky, who saved my butt here, said, Matt, do you mean Locrian? Absolutely. 7th mode is Locrian. I don't think I've made that mistake since school, but anyways. Ricky says, I pay attention, but I would still get a 0 on a test. No, you got an A+ today, Ricky. Connie says, A for effort, Ricky. Excellent. Ricky says, I'm doing Rudolph this month. Which scale would it be associated with? So Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is pretty stock major. That's, it might use some elements of others. Let me look. I think I did this lesson recently, so you would think that I would just remember. But yeah, it is. It's just C major all the way through, basically. I'm trying to find any sort of accidentals. There's a D13 that's used, but that's just secondary function. Oh man, that's a whole nother concept. It is really just C major all the way through in the arrangement I did here on rock class. It's pretty rare for like Christmas music and music like that to be really modal, because modal music tends to be pushing the boundary a little bit, and Christmas music is not really known. Holiday music's not known for pushing boundaries. It's supposed to be comforting and warm, so you get a lot of major in Christmas. But I digress. And so, as far as different songs that create those different sounds, I tried to articulate some examples, and a lot of it's just styles, right? Like the Phrygian with the Spanish flamenco type of sound, or the Lydian with like the sci-fi music, and the Mixolydian with more blues sound, and Dorian's more jazzy, but we've had a couple song examples there with like the Oye Como Va by Carlos Santana. So, but let's see. Are there any other questions to today's monstrosity of a lesson? There's a lot of concepts, a lot of things here. And again, if you just take away one little nugget of this is the sound of a Dorian or something like that, then that's fantastic. That's what we're here for. So let me see. I don't see any other messages here on the chat. And then I don't see on the forum. Zill does say, LOL, maybe that's why I hate Christmas music. It can be, yeah. Christmas music doesn't really push a lot of boundaries. And I'm not insulting it by saying that. It's just, that's the appeal for a lot of people. It's really, it's comforting and it's nostalgic because we've heard it so many times. And as a little side note with it, when I teach arranging to people, if they like Christmas music, I recommend they work on Christmas music for arranging. And the reason is they know Christmas music so well because we've heard it our whole lives. If you've, lived in any like remote metropolitan area, you just hear Christmas music every time you leave the house. And that really kind of, intimacy that you have with it over time can make it a lot easier to work on. So, but I digress. So I hope you guys all have a wonderful holiday season. I can't wait to next year to see what sort of lessons and live lessons we do here at Rock Class 101. Again, just to recap, we've got our 7 different modes: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. Thanks again, Ricky, for the save there. And if you have any questions with this stuff, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. We try to make sure that we look through those and answer any questions you guys have. Ricky says, great job as always, Matt. I love Matt's Rudolph. Awesome. It can be a lot of fun to play Christmas music this time of the year. It can also be fun to play Christmas music any time of the year. There are no rules, right? We're in a pandemic. I digress. I hope you all have a wonderful, safe holiday season, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys next year for the next issue of this live lesson. Thanks so much. Take it easy. I'll talk to you soon.